From a doom metal band so heavy it made Sabbath sound like Sunday school, to an emotional post-punk group that inspired half of indie rock without ever hitting radio, to a Tolkien-inspired cult act that basically invented fantasy metal before it was cool. These are the 15 obscure rock bands from the 80s you need to hear. And one of them? They laid down an album that could have gone platinum if their label hadn't straight up collapsed mid-tour. So if you think you've heard it all from the 80s, think again. Number 1. The sound. The sound were everything post-punk wanted to be. Urgent, emotional, powerful, but they never got their due. Led by Adrian Borland, this British band dropped from the lion's mouth in 1981, and it was absolutely spellbinding. The guitars shimmered, the drums pounded with purpose, and the lyrics, pure poetry wrapped in existential dread. Borland's voice cracked with sincerity, like a man fighting ghosts he couldn't quite outrun. Critics praised them, fans adored them. But the mainstream? Crickets. They were too raw for the charts and too deep for casual listeners. And yet, decades later, you can hear the sound's DNA in bands like Interpol, Editors, and even early Radiohead. Sadly, Borland's battles with mental health cut the story short. But the music? Still timeless, still vital. And if the sound carved their legacy in whispers and shadows, the next band tore it open with distortion, DIY fury, and the kind of melody that would define alt-rock for decades. Number 2, Husker Dü. Fast, fuzzy, fierce. Husker Dü weren't just a punk band, they were a revolution in motion. Coming out of the Minnesota hardcore scene, these guys played blistering fast, but unlike their peers, they had hooks, emotion, soul. Albums like Zen Arcade and New Day Rising didn't just slam, they sang. Bob Mould and Grant Hart could scream and soar in the same breath. They were angry. Yeah, but they were also poetic, wounded, searching. And that blend of noise and heart, it laid the groundwork for Nirvana, Foo Fighters, and almost every alt-rock band that mattered. Despite their influence, they never cracked MTV or radio. But underground, they were the blueprint. And their breakup? Messy, emotional, a true rock tragedy. But their legacy? Untouchable. And while Husker Dü burned fast and loud, the next band took a detour through the hard rock lane, fusing massive arena riffs with soul and shred, and somehow still got lost in the shuffle. Number 3, Blue Murder. When John Sykes left Whitesnake at their peak, people expected fireworks. What they got was Blue Murder, and they weren't ready. Formed in the late 80s, Blue Murder took the big, glossy, hard rock sound and poured raw talent all over it. Sykes was a monster on guitar, his tone ripping through tracks like Valley of the Kings and Jelly Roll. The songwriting, cinematic, the vocals, powerful. They had it all. Killer riffs, huge hooks, and a rhythm section that could level arenas. Their 1989 self-titled debut had everything needed to dominate. But bad label support and weird timing sunk their momentum. Hair metal was dying, grunge was rising, and Blue Murder got caught in the middle. But listen now, and the album sounds like a greatest hits record that never happened. Fans of Whitesnake, early Def Leppard, and even Dio will find gold here. And if Blue Murder missed their shot at stadium glory, the next band went deeper, slower, heavier, and doomier than most could handle in 1984. And you cannot handle me if you don't subscribe right now. Number 4, Trouble. If Black Sabbath had grown up in Chicago with a Bible in one hand and a bong in the other, you'd get trouble. This doom metal pioneer dropped their self-titled album in 1984, and it was heavy. Not just sonically, but spiritually. They weren't just playing slow riffs, they were preaching through distortion. Eric Wagner's vocals had a mournful, almost ghostly quality, while the dual guitars of Bruce Franklin and Rick Wartell created thick walls of sound that crushed and uplifted in equal measure. Tracks like The Tempter and Psalm 9 weren't your average metal anthems, they were apocalyptic visions, dark, dense, and unshakable. Trouble never fit neatly into the hair metal boom or the thrash wave that followed. They were their own beast, a thinking man's doom band, and that kept them on the fringe. But ask any fan of Candlemass, Cathedral, or even early Soundgarden where that heaviness came from, and they'll name-drop Trouble. And while Trouble brought the thunder slowly, the next band came blazing out with power metal glory, lightning speed solos, and a debut album so good, it's criminal how few people know it. Number 5. Warrior.
Eternally searching to destroy the beast. Destroy! Destroy!
Some bands are forgotten because they're not that good. Warrior was forgotten because the world just wasn't paying attention. Their 1985 debut Fighting for the Earth was a straight-up power metal clinic. Razor-sharp riffs, soaring vocals, and lyrics that felt ripped from a comic book crossover with Iron Maiden. Vocalist Paramore McCarty had pipes for days, while guitarist Joe Floyd ripped solos like he had a grudge against every string. The album opener, also called Fighting for the Earth, is still one of the most epic, anthemic hidden gems in the entire 80s metal canon. They had the look, the sound, the vision. But bad label deals, poor timing, and lineup shifts knocked them off course. Meanwhile, other bands with half the talent were hitting the charts. Still, Fighting for the Earth has aged like a fine, armored wine. And metalheads in the know treat it like sacred scrolls. And while Warrior was fighting battles in the sky, the next band was crafting atmospheric anthems so lush and emotional, it's a wonder they didn't invent shoegaze a few years early. Number 6. The Chameleons, UK. Guitar delay never sounded so emotional. The Chameleons were masters of atmosphere, weaving melancholic melodies and post-punk power into songs that felt like diaries scrawled across the sky. Their 1983 debut Script of the Bridge is a masterpiece. Every track soaked in echo, layered guitars, and Mark Burgess' vulnerable vocals. They weren't writing hits. They were building worlds. Tracks like Up the Down Escalator and Second Skin hit with an emotional weight that bands today still try to copy. And they came before The Cure got cinematic, before shoegaze became a scene, before Coldplay and Interpol ever picked up guitars. They should have blown up. But again, wrong time, no label muscle, and zero commercial compromise. The Chameleons made art, not singles. Today, they're recognized as one of the most influential unsung bands of the 80s, especially for fans of post-punk, dream pop, and indie rock. And while the Chameleons were painting soundscapes, the next band was revving up biker riffs, horror movie vibes, and one killer metal soundtrack. Number 7. Fastway. Take one Motorhead guitarist, one humble pie drummer, and toss in a young Irish singer with pipes of pure fire. And you get Fastway. Formed by Fast. Eddie Clarke, after leaving Motorhead, Fastway leaned more into bluesy hard rock than metal, but they still hit hard. Their 1983 self-titled debut had groove, grit, and guitar tone that could peel paint off a Pontiac. Then came Trick or Treat in 1986, a heavy metal horror movie soundtrack that became a cult classic. Tracks like After Midnight and Stand Up were stadium-sized and anthemic, tailor-made for headbanging teens and horror nerds alike. The band never quite blew up like their pedigree promised, but they earned a loyal fan base, especially among fans who wanted something between AC/DC and Dio. Fastway was too bluesy for glam, too melodic for thrash, and somehow got lost in the noise. But those who know still blast them loud. And while Fastway was tearing up soundtracks, the next band was building an entire fantasy world full of swords, sorcery, and doom riffs thicker than Dragon's Breath. Number 8, Cirith Ungol. Named after a Tolkien deep cut, you know it's gonna be heavy. Cirith Ungol were doom before doom was cool, blending fantasy, horror, and crushing riffs into a sound that felt like Sabbath in a wizard's dungeon. Their 1984 album, King of the Dead, is legendary among metal diehards. Tim Baker's vocals are an acquired taste, high-pitched, shrieking, and absolutely unhinged. But that only adds to the drama. The band's riffs are molten and relentless, with a sound that bridges traditional heavy metal and the epic doom genre that would rise years later. They weren't slick, they weren't radio ready, but that's why their cult never died. Bands like Atlantean Codex, Eternal Champion, and countless doom acts cite Cirith Ungol as sacred metal scripture. And after years in the shadows, they even staged a comeback, proving that the underground never forgets. And while Cirith Ungol was lost in fantasy realms, the next band emerged from the ashes of goth royalty, bringing melodrama, cathedral-sized riffs, and a shadow that still looms over the genre. Number 9, The Mission, UK. If the Sisters of Mercy were a haunted cathedral, the Mission were the stained glass windows shattering into rain. Formed by ex-Sisters members Wayne Hussey and Craig Adams, the Mission fused goth rock with stadium-sized ambition. Think U2 meets Bauhaus with a splash of Shakespearean heartbreak. Their 1986 debut, God's Own Medicine, is pure grandeur. Wasteland, Severina, and Stay With Me all sound like they were written to echo across moonlit ruins. They dressed like vampire pirates, sang like tortured poets, and delivered choruses so massive they could have swallowed arenas. But despite a loyal fan base and a strong presence in the UK and Europe, they never broke big in the US. Goth fans worshipped them, critics misunderstood them, but their influence? It drips through modern alt-rock, goth revival, and even symphonic metal. And while the Mission soared on dark wings, the next band cranked up the speed, added some prog flash, and built an underground legacy from pure theatrical metal power. Number 10, Savatage. Think Queen with double-kick drums, that's Savatage. Hailing from Florida, Savatage started as a straightforward metal band, but by 1987's Hall of the Mountain King, they were blending progressive structure, theatrical vocals, and neoclassical shred into something no one else was touching. John Oliva's voice was raw power, part banshee, part opera singer. And Chris Oliva, R.I.P., was an absolute wizard on guitar, fusing metal riffs with classical melodies like he was born on a symphonic battlefield. Hall of the Mountain King is a full-blown epic. Songs like 24 Hours Ago and the title track mix storytelling, soaring solos, and dramatic mood swings in a way that predicted everything from Trans-Siberian Orchestra. which they became, by the way, to modern prog metal giants like Symphony X. They had talent for days, but their sound was too smart for glam and too melodic for thrash. So they fell through the cracks. But make no mistake, Savatage carved out a legacy that still echoes in metal's highest towers. And while they built castles in sound, the next band kept things sleek, sexy, and pure rock and roll, straight out of Denmark. Number 11, Fate. Fate sounded like the band you always imagined was playing in the background of an 80s action movie scene where the hero walks in slow-mo through a neon-lit bar. This Danish glam metal act had all the right pieces: tight hooks, arena-ready choruses, and some of the cleanest production Europe had to offer. Their 1985 self-titled debut and 1986's A Matter of Attitude are both glittering showcases of melodic hard rock done right. Songs like Love on the Rocks and Hard as a Rock hit with swagger and polish, but never felt like hair metal clones. They had a Euro flair that made them stand out, and a knack for actual musicianship that often gets lost in that scene. Why didn't they blow up globally? Probably because they didn't come from LA. And glam in the 80s was a zip code game. But fans of Def Leppard, Europe, or Bonfire, they worship Fate. And while Fate sparkled with slick riffs and synth swagger, the next band came in swinging 3 guitars and a medieval battle plan. Number 12, Leatherwolf.
Without your love, it won't be the same. I run.
Triple Axe Attack. That's not a nickname. It was Leatherwolf's actual lineup. This Orange County metal band ran 3 lead guitarists, and they used them all. Their sound was massive, blending the galloping riffs of Iron Maiden with US power metal intensity and lyrical themes straight out of a Renaissance fair. Their 1987 self-titled album, not to be confused with their earlier debut of the same name, is packed with insane musicianship and tracks like The Calling and Rise or Fall that sound like they should have been played before jousting tournaments. Leatherwolf had the skill, the look, and the songs. But like many of their peers, they got lost in the record label shuffle. They weren't glam enough to land on MTV and not thrash enough for the underground metal mags. Still, that didn't stop them from developing a cult following, especially among fans who dig epic metal with big solos and battle-ready anthems. And if Leatherwolf brought medieval fire, the next band sharpened their blade in the trenches of the NWO BHM and carved out 2 albums that still rip to this day. Number 13, Tokyo Blade. Part of the NWO BHM, new wave of British heavy metal, Tokyo Blade should have been massive. They had the riffs, the look, the hooks, and they arrived at just the right time. Their self-titled 1983 debut and 1984's Night of the Blade are wall-to-wall bangers, full of harmonized guitars, soaring vocals, and the kind of choruses that stick in your head for weeks. Tracks like Midnight Rendezvous and Someone to Love walk the line between street-level grit and arena-level ambition. They were poised to break big alongside bands like Iron Maiden, Saxon, and Def Leppard. But they got buried by label issues, endless lineup changes, and bad management decisions. Still, true metalheads know Tokyo Blade's early records are pure NWO BHM gold, the kind of albums that still get passed around like sacred relics in denim-clad circles. And while Tokyo Blade chased glory in the UK, the next band was right on the cusp of hitting big in the States, with one album that almost took them all the way. Number 14, Y&T. If you've heard Mean Streak, you already know. Y&T were this close to being the next big thing. Originally formed in the 70s, These San Francisco hard rockers really hit their stride in the 80s. They had big vocals, courtesy of frontman Dave Meniketti, even bigger guitars, and the kind of melodic instincts that made every chorus sound like a sing-along waiting to happen. Mean Streak, 1983, is their crowning achievement. A near-perfect blend of hard rock muscle and melodic finesse. Tracks like Midnight in Tokyo and Don't Stop Running absolutely rip, and Meniketti's voice, one of the most underrated in the business. They open for everyone, AC/DC, Ozzy, even Dio, and had all the ingredients for success. But somehow they never crossed the finish line. Maybe they were too metal for rock radio and too rock for the metal crowd, but ask any touring musician and they'll tell you, Y&T should have been huge. And while Y&T almost touched the spotlight, our final band stayed buried deep, a Cleveland metal act that left behind one vicious, high-voltage cult classic. Number 15, Shok Paris. If there's one band that proves regional metal could crush just as hard as the big leagues, it's Shok Paris. Coming straight out of Cleveland, Shok Paris dropped Go for the Throat in 1984, and it's pure, high-octane US metal. Think early Savatage meets Riot with a bit of speed metal bite. Vocalist Vic Hicks had a gritty, powerful delivery, and the band's twin guitars blazed through tracks like Burning and Go Down Fighting like they were trying to melt speakers. It's raw, it's real, and it hits hard. They had that underground vibe, the kind of band you'd stumble into at a smoky dive bar and leave thinking, these guys are better than half the bands on the radio. They never broke through nationally, but Go for the Throat has become a cult metal classic, and the band still gets love from collectors and US power metal purists today. That was 15 obscure rock bands from the 80s you need to hear. Unsung legends, cult heroes, and underdogs who rock just as hard as the big names, maybe even harder. Which one hit you the hardest? Let us know in the comments. And if you've got an underground favorite that didn't make the list, drop it down below so we can all dig deeper. Be sure to subscribe, hit that bell, and send this to a friend who thinks they've heard every band from the 80s. And if this list blew your speakers, wait till you hear what the underground was cooking back in the 70s. Click the video on screen for 15 obscure rock bands from the 70s you need to hear.